Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to our first virtual Women Leading in Technology event. I'm Jean Machart, Board Chair for WLiT and also Vice President of Digital at UnitedHealth. I'm coming to you from my sunroom at home, but still we have the same community of energy and excitement as part of WLiT. And so for today, I wanted just to start with our mission of WLiT, and we're about connect, educate, and reaching back. And so for each event, we always focus on core content to look at how can you expand what's next for your career, what's the next skill you're looking for, or also meeting different professionals to plant a seed for what could be next. Now for Reach Back tonight, I first want to thank you for the money you've already donated. We're very close to $2,000 across all the attendees to sponsor women going through or really being able to participate in a technical boot camp through the Software Guild. What I'd like to do is challenge all of us together. We can donate a little more to look with the goal of doubling to achieve $4,000, which would give us then 100% of the tuition. And all you have to do is go back to your registration, modify it a little bit, and at a number that feels comfortable to, again, reach back and give back through the community of women leading in technology. When we think about next then, I want to also thank the full board of Women Leading in Technology. These leaders represent you not only for these events, but within the community, looking at what's the right content, receiving your feedback of what you're looking for, and bringing it here on our events and also the upcoming happy hour. And so just a great call out for my colleagues as we come together for the event. Additionally, I'd like to point out we're going to have a Q&A. Obviously, Corie Barry is the star for us tonight, and that we'll have questions that'll be already formed, but also a time where you're able to use Pigeonhole. So if you can go to your phone and you can type in questions throughout the evening, and then you can also vote. So the top questions will come to the top, and those are the ones that then we'll ask during the second portion of the conversation. Now, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors. As you know, we have annual sponsors that make this possible for WLiT to put these events on. And so obviously Best Buy with Corie Barry here as CEO for Best Buy, but then also OST for Lisa Elite is Vice President Sales and Marketing is here from OST to share her key message. And so want to introduce Lisa and turn it over to her for her thoughts.
Thank you so much, Jean. So hi, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Lisa Elick with Open Systems Technologies, or OST. I think most of you that are on the line in tech would agree that the future is all about creating digital business models, whether that's integrating technology in products, prioritizing the digital customer experience, thinking differently about how to use data, or even creating new selling channels. And so I was thinking about, the 1 or 2 minutes that I've got to open this up. And I think the thing I want to share is this. We've talked to dozens of CIOs, CEOs, tech leaders over the last several weeks. And the biggest thing that I'm hearing is that this new normal that we're in, there's this critical wave of prioritization happening. And certainly in some cases that's cutting where you need to sustain. But in others, it's doubling down in priority areas where you want to be in a position of strength from a customer digital experience standpoint. And similarly, I'm sure all of us on the line are probably dealing with our own prioritization between work and life and kids at home. I know I've got my 5-year-old son here downstairs, but whatever that looks like for you, just a thank you for prioritizing your time here today and joining us on this session with Women Leading in Tech. I love their mission of promoting community through networking and conversation, which is obviously what today's about. So I'm very grateful to be part of this community. And one quick final thing I can't resist sharing, it's related to Best Buy. It was something that I saw on LinkedIn 2 nights ago. And it was an employee saying, this morning at Best Buy headquarters, we raised the flag to signify the start of Pride Month. I thank Corie Barry for her continued advocacy of our employee resource groups and minority groups. I am proud to work at Best Buy, was what this individual said. And I just thought that was pretty amazing, knowing that this session was coming up here today, to see Corie being such a strong leader in that regard at a time when I think we need advocacy and collaboration and lifting each other up and leadership now more than ever. So I'm personally very excited to hear this conversation. So with that, thank you for having us sponsor this, and I'll turn it back over.
Would like to introduce Corie Barry. She is the CEO of Best Buy since June 2019 and has been with the company for more than 20 years, holding a variety of financial and operational roles across the organization, both in the field and in the corporate office. Under Corie's leadership, Best Buy is driving toward being one of the best places to work in America, doubling their significant customer relationship events to 50 million and growing annual revenue to 50 billion by fiscal 2025. Corie, I'd like to welcome you to WLiT and really appreciate your time and of the conversation.
It is such a treat to be here, and just a couple things quickly to you can tell that I'm serious about this event because I actually put lipstick on and for probably 3 months. So that's how excited I am. For those kind words. Our employees are amazing. And if you don't mind, one quick story about that. I got a text from one of our employees who happens to be in technology, who saw that picture on LinkedIn and talked about how moved she was. And I just said, I was so happy that we could create a supportive and welcoming environment. And she wrote back and said, what you need to know is that there might be someone driving with their family in the car and they see that flag and they know there's somewhere that they'll be accepted, even if they don't feel accepted in the car that they're riding in. And that was such a moving, wonderful encapsulation of why I think we feel here it is so important to create truly inclusive environments. So I just appreciate you calling that out. And I think every one of us has the stories that create the empathy in us that make us drive for those outcomes. So thank you to this team and for inviting me to this event. I don't know if I have any magical words of wisdom, but I'm happy to share any stories that I can.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you. I thought we could start off with really your journey of becoming a CEO of, how did you build to gain the credibility and key decisions that have gotten you here?
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about your career journey always in a couple ways. You can talk about it through the jobs that you've had, but I like to talk about it a little bit more through how I tried to make decisions. And so I'm just going to give a few examples, and there's 5 actually that I think were crucial ways in which I tried to make decisions. So I've been at Best Buy for over 20 years. A little bit unusual that I've stayed at a large scale company like this for that long. And I've stayed here because I truly believe my value system and what's important to me aligns with the company, and the company's afforded me many opportunities. The 5 things I have found important, and then I'll give a quick example of each. The first is breadth of experience. Within my first 7 years here, I probably had 5 different, very distinct roles. And I just jumped at the idea of breadth of experience because I just felt like tactically, you're more marketable the more breadth that you have. And that was important to me. That's not everyone's route, to be clear. Specialty can be another wonderful way to grow your career. But for me, breadth became a really important calling card. The second big thing for me is it's a Venn diagram, because if you can't answer a question from a Venn diagram, then you're not trying hard enough. That is my strong belief. The 3 circles here are: 1, what does the company need from me? 2, what do I love to do? And 3, what am I good at? And we all know those circles don't always line up perfectly. Sometimes, and I'll use a specific example, I took a role in corporate FP&A. I knew I probably could be good at it, and I'm not saying that to be self-serving, like it's a skill set I had, and I knew the company really needed it. It was a really broken department, it needed rehauling. I didn't know that I would love it, and in fact, I was pretty sure I wouldn't love it. And I worked over time to find love in that role in a different way, meaning I grew a team and I became very proud of their engagement. And so that idea of really trying to work to make those concentric circles fit together has always been incredibly important to me. The third key piece for me, and it is against all of human nature, and that is to try to make yourself uncomfortable. Because when you push yourself outside your comfort zone, you will tend to grow the most. The first time I left finance, I had 10 years of experience at Best Buy in finance, and I was tapped on the shoulder to run the Geek Squad for the west half of the US. And I was incredibly nervous about doing something that was so far outside my experience. But that ability to push outside the comfort zone, I grew more in that year working with the Geek Squad than anything else I could have done. So really trying to drive, because you'll stay in a place that's comfortable. Like, that is human nature. You really have to try to push yourself to experience things in a different way. The fourth big thing, I think, is taking risky roles. I like the roles that no one else seems to want. I like them messy because the chances are good I can clean them up. And I took some roles along the way, including leading our strategic growth office, leading services on an interim basis when the leader left. Those were not things that were necessarily in my finance wheelhouse. They were risky. But I also knew they could make a huge difference for the company. And I felt like, I always say to my kids, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I do that drill a lot in my own head. This, what's the worst thing that could happen drill, where I really try to think about what really could be the downside. And then finally, and then I'll stop, ask for what you want. There was an important point in my career where I wanted to go out in the field and really get some hands-on work working with our general managers and our district staff. And it was incredibly uncomfortable to go to that hiring senior vice president and say, I want this role someday. Maybe not today, maybe not in 2 years, but can you help me get this role someday? And it did turn out to be one of the most influential roles that I had. So once in a while, putting down that line in the sand and just asking for what you want. No one's going to know if you don't ask. And I think that's another really important way in which you can continue to navigate your career.
I love that. I love you started off with a Venn diagram. But I'm kind of, well, you know, I'm a nerd, and so that just really fits well with me. And then I like also that you ask for what you want, and I like that someday felt broad and open. So you know, building on Venn diagrams and frameworks, just wondering what your thoughts are on, you know, really best practices of how to, and frameworks of how do you shape your brand as a leader as you grew into a CEO?
It's so interesting because it's not like you put stakes in the ground along the way, and it's not like you're always consciously thinking about the brand that you're building. It's funny. I mean, there are so many books on leadership and branding that proves to me there is no one way or answer on how to do it. My personal strong point of view is that who you are as a person needs to align very clearly with who you are as a leader. If you find yourself showing up as someone different at work than you are in your kind of real life, then you're going to create friction in your life, and it will not be sustainable. So finding a way to lead in a way that feels very authentic to who you are, that for me has been what became kind of the staple of my brand, and what I think is important. Interestingly, that also means that, you know, there are times I'm vulnerable with the team because that's who I am in real life. There are times that I have great days and low days, and I tend to talk about those with people. Like many of you, I have, you know, kids, and they're a big part of my life, and often they'll come flying into one of these videos. This idea of trying to be your most authentic self and creating space for others to also be their authentic selves, I think is a cornerstone of what I have found important, because it just, friction between who you are at your work life and who you are in your personal life will wear you out.
I like that. It does feel risky at moments, doesn't it? I like that vulnerability component.
It's really, it is another layer of kind of the uncomfortable question that we were talking about, which is there is a hard moment where you're going to put yourself out there and it won't resonate with everyone. And so you continue to learn and refine.
Do you see that really as a now model of leadership going forward, of that vulnerability?
I think it's certainly playing a bigger role than it ever has. I mean, many of you in your companies are trying to think about how you make Teams meetings like this feel interactive. Like, this is incredibly difficult and you all are dealing with it. I know there's, hundreds of people out there, but I can't see one of you nodding at me while I'm talking. And so it's you don't know if you resonate with people and you don't know exactly how to connect. But what we see in our verbatims from our employees, you can see the moment a leader shows a bit of vulnerability, that is what our employees respond to immediately in the moment. That's always when we get the most comments or the most Q&A, is in that moment where you get to see the humanity of someone else. And so I think when it is difficult to personally connect, then providing those moments of humanity, those moments of vulnerability become, I think, 7 times more important.
It's insightful. I like that. To your point of defining moments, when you think about your career, what was one of your defining moments as you evolved as a leader? What behaviors perhaps did you consciously change to evolve?
The funny thing about defining moments is you never know that they're going to be a defining moment. Mine is a little bit interesting. When I was approximately, let's see here, probably 10 years into my career, my mom became very ill. She had cancer, she had breast cancer and metastasized. And she decided to come home for hospice care. And I had to make a call at that point on what I wanted to do personally, which for me, the right thing to do was to take a leave from my role at Best Buy and go home and help take care of her. This sounds silly in hindsight, but the courage at that moment in my career to say, I'm going to prioritize my personal life, it was probably the first time I'd really tried to make that decision. And it became very pivotal for me because there's a couple of reasons. One, the organization welcomed me back with such open arms and such support and such a willingness to help me be successful on the other side, that of course it garnered my undying devotion. But 2, also underscored for me some of the moments that all of us have where we have to have the courage to try to make space for a personal moment, or sometimes a long series of personal moments. And I think each of us finds strength at various points in our careers. For me, that was a really important point where I did what I felt was right personally, and it translated into a much better employment experience with Best Buy.
I like that one. It is interesting of the setting boundaries when you need to from a personal side, and it does feel very courageous. You don't know the answer back. I like that. Switching gears, just given really where the world is, and just in the few months of how many things have drastically changed, just wanted to get your thoughts of how are you planning when things are so unpredictable, with many balls up in the air and probably more to come, it feels. I just a hypothesis.
Every day someone says, what could happen next? Something very interesting happens next. I give our team an immense amount of credit for planning with agility. And I think this is a topic that will resonate with many of the people on this call. So many of the underpinnings of a truly agile workforce are what we're using every single day right now. Like, let's take a retailer as an example. A big box retailer is used to creating a very fulsome end-to-end SOP, standard operating procedure, making sure every T is crossed and I is dotted. And then we roll it out across 1,000 stores, never to be touched again, because that is how things will be done. And now we move to a curbside only model in a matter of 48 hours. We're iterating constantly based on feedback from our managers and our employees. That was all done on the back of this amazing combination of technology, but also, frankly, just human intestinal fortitude to make it work. And from there, we added appointment-only scheduling. And then from there, we have started to open up our stores with social distancing. I mean, every one of these are in and of themselves changes that probably would have taken us a year, carefully spaced and not iterated on. And instead, we're churning through those in a matter of weeks. And so I think it's a little less about planning, and it's a little bit more about having the courage to away the playbook, having the courage to throw away the scorecards the way we used to look at them or the way we've always run the business, and instead flex this muscle of agility and willingness to try, knowing that and saying out loud that we're not always going to get it perfectly right, but we will make moves and we will listen to feedback and we will make changes.
I love that model of, you're right, taking what we think about agile teams to such a large scale. Yeah, you know, it's amazing of the power then of your employees and leaders to do that.
I mean, that is what by far, someone asked me, what do you feel like the mood is in the stores? And the word I hear the most, I do a lot of FaceTiming with our general managers because unfortunately I can't go do store visits. And so I get a chance to chat with them. And the word that I hear the most often is proud. And they're proud. And they're proud of how we're trying to manage. They're proud of their teams. They're proud of their own leadership capabilities that have grown phenomenally. They're proud of our customers. There's this like immense pride that comes from, I think, unleashing our teams to do amazing things. And that undercurrent of pride is something I share deeply. I'm just amazed at what our team has been able to do.
You know, it just feels like Best Buy must be so mission focused to do that then.
Yeah, we talk a lot at Best Buy about our purpose, and our purpose is to enrich lives through technology. That is what we believe we're on this planet to do, and frankly, never been made more real than by the time that we're in, right? We're doing everything on the back of technology, and most of us in our homes, we're entertaining, we're cooking, we're working, we're learning, we're connecting. The purpose has just come to life in a really unique way. And then when I think you can unleash individual purpose against the company's purpose, that is where you really can see amazing things happen. And I think for a lot of our leaders, they really feel like some of their individual purpose has been unleashed in a pretty different way.
It sounds like a Venn diagram again.
Yeah, but probably. There's one circle in there somewhere that is the tired circle, though, because it's a lot of work. I make it sound like it's all sunshine and rainbows. It's a lot of work, as I'm sure many of you can attest to living the life that you're living too.
It is. I'm in healthcare at UnitedHealth Group, and we went to almost the reverse of a retiree. Every day was a work day. And
right.
As we switched, and it was again mission focused and had to be, but it was what can we do to support our members with COVID? So
one of the CEOs I talked to said, "I don't know if I'm working at home or sleeping at work," and I was like, "Yeah, that is actually the perfect way to think about this," because especially in the first 8 weeks, every day just blended together. It was something else. So that in and of itself is a whole nother challenge that we all have both in our personal lives, but also on behalf of our teams. It's real.
It is. And when you look at some of the biggest changes you've made, during this time, which ones do you think you're going to keep as part of the new normal?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. There's 4 that I think really we will work hard to keep. One is this idea for us of choice for our customers. I think all of us are going to have our own risk tolerance levels, which means all of us will be willing to shop in different ways. For some people, you're fine going into a store as long as people have masks. For others, curbside is perfect because you don't have to interact with anyone, or having it shipped to your home is. This idea of customer choice and the customer really being in charge, which means it's not about channels at all, which is totally counterintuitive to us. It's about what does the customer want to accomplish, and then how do I set up the easiest way for them to do it the way that they want. So that's one that is going to stick. 2 is the speed at which we work. I think almost everyone on this call would probably nod. The speed at which companies have been able to accomplish things broadly has just been phenomenal. And for us, we take real pride and joy in that ability to move at pace and we are trying to re-engineer ourselves so that we capture that ability to move at pace. The third thing that has been really wonderful to watch is the enterprise mindset of our leaders. So when you're worried about employee and customer safety, or you're worried about the vitality of the company, the typical silos and walls break down in a way that I've never seen. That idea of real enterprise thinking and everyone kind of getting out of their own zone and P&L, that has been incredibly powerful, and I think it will stick. And then the final is, I think there will be more flexibility in the way that we work going forward. I think it's going to get harder because when we start to move into what I call kind of multimodal approaches, meaning you're going to have half the workforce maybe at corporate, you're going to have half the workforce in their homes, that's actually much harder than every one of us isolated on teams separately. And so I think this idea of flexibility will absolutely continue, but very few of even our corporate infrastructures are geared toward a multimodal world. And so I think we're going to have to do a lot of work to think about how you create culture and how you have quick digital drive-by conversations when your workforce might be much more distributed than it's ever been before.
What a great opportunity, though, enrolling for people. You know, you could go on vacation and still work for a day or two and come back.
No, I don't want you to do that. That is not what vacation is for. But at least
fair enough.
We're laughing as CEOs. If someone would have said, look, all of the CEOs in America will be working from home literally overnight. I mean, I don't know if we just all thought we were that important or what, but no one would have thought that was possible. And yet everybody, there we are. So I think it will open doors for people to feel more comfortable finding the balance that works for them. But I think we're going to have to do it very intentionally, because otherwise you will inadvertently create, you know, kind of the have and have nots, or the feeling of inclusion or exclusion. And so I think it's going to take more work than we've yet really digested and talked about.
Well, that makes sense. You know, to that line, just interested of how do you see Best Buy's role evolving as companies and leaders place more of an inclusive environment, so it could be attracting, hiring, retaining diverse workforce?
I think this is a space where the role of companies has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. And I think, you know, it started with our role is to, I'll overly simplify, hire more diverse people. I think what it's developed into, and especially if you look at some of the actions taken by companies over the last 3 weeks, we feel a real social responsibility, both to improve the quality of inclusion at our own companies, to improve the amount of diversity at our own companies. So there, you can see suites of activities, and it's imperative because literally every bit of evidence ever since the beginning of time says diverse teams come up with better, faster, and more objective solutions to problems. But I also think you're seeing companies fill a very different and important role by putting their point of view about the community out there. And I think you're starting to see CEOs advocate at the national level for the conversations that need to happen. And so I think the conversation has broadened from how do you hire or how do you promote into, no, how do I create a holistic framework at Best Buy that is going to help us see more diverse leaders, all the way to our role as a company to advocate on behalf of others and on behalf of social justice. So it is one of the biggest changes, I actually think, in how corporations are actually living out their values and making some pretty profound commitments and statements as to their role in society.
I just love that. I love that leadership as a community leader, and to your point of social justice for all. I know that we have 3 girls in college and high school, and so that's a huge deal. And I think about not only for us, but also that next generation of being leaders. So just really want to thank you for that.
Well, and I love that you bring that up, because they want to be unleashed. They would like to help solve the problem. They want to be given space to be able to do that. And definitely our greatest asset is our employees, The question is, how do we create the right forums to really listen to them and use them to help us act in the way that really makes the most sustainable sense?
Do you have other advice you'd have for all of us as leaders to create more of an inclusive, environment? It could be a strategy or even, one step in it.
I think it's clear none of us have nailed this. I mean, I'll just speak from personal reflection.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with some of the progress. Our board is 60% female. It's about a third people of color, but we have a long way to go. Our leadership team, we have, I'm going to call it decent gender diversity, but we have a long way to go in terms of true diverse thought leadership across our leadership positions. And so I start from a place of clearly we haven't nailed it either, and we commit to continuing to be better. But there's a few things that seem like they're at least helping. One is, and I think you all know this, room for conversation and room for open and hard conversations. And we started candid conversations here at Best Buy. Many of your organizations have similar types of conversations where you can create empathy and room to learn from others' real life experiences. And I just find, for me at least personally, that is the best way for me to continue to move my advocacy and education forward. And so I think really creating safe spaces for people to have open conversation is incredibly important. I just hit on the second thing that I think is important, and that is leveraging passionate employees to help. Listening to them, learning from them. We actually sent a letter to our customers that talked about our position and our point of view that racism in America is unacceptable, and we were taking actions, and a lot of our actions have been around the achievement gap and our ability to help in technology in particular, in the achievement gap. But we also said we were putting together a task force of employees who are going to help us continue to make hard decisions and to ensure we are taking actions that really feel like they resonate and are sustainable over time. And so I think using the people who care a lot is so important. And then finally, I think for all of us, there has to be some willingness to put yourself out there. Part of the reason, back to the point on vulnerability, it can be hard to have conversations and put a strong point of view or stake in the ground out there. But I think it is really important for every one of us as leaders to have a personal point of view. At Best Buy, we've adopted 4 what we call inclusive behaviors. And they are courage, empathy, vulnerability, and grace. And I will tell you, in the time of COVID, which has now been exacerbated by what we've seen happen across the country after the killing of George Floyd, those attributes, I think everyone is practicing at greater and greater levels. And so I think being willing to practice those behaviors, take good partners who can help you along the way, and foster conversation and commitments is incredibly important.
Thank you. Those are all actionable. I appreciate it. To your point of expanding the conversation, we're now moving to audience participation. So they have an app. I'll work through the top questions. And the first one really is, how do you lead or stay sane as a powerful woman in a male-dominated industry? As you know, many of the women here are in the technology field or industry, and as they look around the room, typically it's men, and they're not as many women there. So interested in your insights.
I kind of turned this one on its head. And somewhere in my career journey, I decided that being unique in the room was a competitive advantage. And that there weren't a ton of people who looked like me, which meant I brought something to the conversation that I felt like was unique and different. And I actually took an interesting amount of self-confidence from that. And I'm not saying it works every single day. There are still days where I'm in a room of particularly, 30 investors and everyone's, not like me. But I like the challenge of that. And I like to provide maybe just a little bit of an example of what's possible. So I think I just decided somewhere along the way that for me was going to be something that made me unique, and I thought that was important, and I thought I could provide a point of view that was different, and ultimately I just decided hopefully would be valued over time.
I like that point of value, and if we have a follow-up of, do you have a technique of when to really get your voice heard when it is a different idea? So it's a valuable idea, but perhaps counter to everyone else in the room. You know, what are some tips for all of us on that one?
That is, it is so hard. So back to my thoughts around trying to be authentically who you are. My authentic self tends to be authoritative. I don't know how else to put that. Which means I tend to have a strong personality, and I will make points vehemently when I have passion. And I've worked to hone that over the years because you want to use it thoughtfully and carefully. But when I have an idea I feel passionately about, I'm going to little bit more of that passion show. And I think that for me, again, this is very personal depending on who you are and how you like to lead. For me, that can often be a turning point where people kind of like sit up a little bit more and realize I am passionate and serious about my point of view on the topic. Secondarily, I also practice to try to land a point very succinctly and clearly so I can land it multiple times if I need to. It was a skill that I've learned in working with investors, and someone gave me this advice early on, and they said, don't over answer. Meaning it's very easy to just continue to provide all the details, especially when you know a lot of the details after 20 years at the company. And you kind of want to keep going down the rabbit hole. Instead, how do you shorten it to the point you've got to land? And sometimes our investors too, they want to hear what they want to hear. So they'll say, so are you saying this? And I'll be, no, that is not what I'm saying. And I will succinctly land the points again. For me, that is what works. And it is often for me, the confidence to do that comes from feeling like I am deeply in command of the content. I spend a lot of time making sure I really do understand the details. I try to incorporate many points of view. And I gain some of that confidence when I really feel like I am coming from a place of competency.
I like both of those tips. Thank you.
I don't know. This is another one that you guys feel free to send tips my way too, because I think this is for every one of us at various points in our careers, and depending on even how our career is accelerating, there are all kinds of points on discomfort and trying to find the way you confidently work your way through discomfort. It's not always about being the only woman. Sometimes it's just you just got promoted and now the people that used to be your peers now report to you. There's discomfort in that. And so finding your own strength in moments of discomfort and naming those things that help you with confidence, I think is really important.
Yeah, I like your point on naming. Once you label it, then you can deal with it.
And then you lever it. Like once I realized, no, I need to understand things really deeply. I'm proud of the fact that I'm going to go through every detail in that month-end deck, because that helps me feel like I'm ready to be in that room.
There's a question around how do you distinguish personal hours and work hours, and obviously there's a flexibility about it. So work-life balance doesn't exist really, but how do you define the boundaries of it?
No one is going to define your boundaries except you. The nature of companies, large or small, is that they will take as much as you humanly want to give them. And I wish there was a perfect answer to the work-life balance question. I think the reason it's asked in almost every forum that I am participating in, is because no one's given the right answer yet. And I won't have the right answer either. But I am a big believer in scheduling those things that are most important and sticking to it. I'm also a big believer in telling others that I am doing so that I can, in every way possible, try to set an example. But I'm also, I practice grace with myself. I sometimes work at home. I also sometimes home at work. And, you know, I might need to be on gap.com ordering school clothes that can be delivered because I have no other time to do it in between meetings, you know, on a Tuesday. I believe strongly in making those things genuinely work flexibly. And then, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I also, I mean, I come from a very special place, which is my husband stays home to help take care of our kids. And I know not many people on this video chat probably have that same opportunity. And so I'm conscientious about talking about how I do it, because how someone else does it might look completely different based on their situation. But I always go back to this idea that only you can define what balance is going to look like for you. And I would ask you to try not to apologize for whatever balance looks like for you. Trust me, I show up at a lot of baseball games in high heels and, you know, a suit. Like, that's what I got. I'm usually late. So, you know, that is who I am. And I try hard not to apologize for it.
I might have broken a heel or two at a soccer game, so I get it.
It's real. Soccer's harder because they dig into the grass.
They do.
Yep.
You know, what advice would you give to a woman in her mid-20s in terms of a high-tech career?
No matter what I say, it won't exactly be from wherever your seat is, so take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But my best advice from my career background, and I also have a sister who is in her 20s, so I try to stay as connected as possible. Stick to it. And you have a unique value that you bring to the table. There actually still, to this day, sadly, there aren't that many people like you. And you can accomplish amazing things because you bring a unique perspective to the work. And so if I look back at myself in my 20s, if anything, I just wish maybe I would have pushed a little harder and had just a little bit more, I hesitate to use confidence, but more of a bit of confidence in my own abilities, and therefore, you know, just continue to drive a little bit harder. I think I really worried a lot in my 20s. Like, I was always worried about, am I doing well enough? And is the job being performed the way that it needs to be? And what does somebody think of me? And I think instead, if I would have put a little bit more energy into worrying less and driving more, I think I probably would have been healthier, and B, it might have even pushed me along a little bit faster.
Do you think there's a question then of, we can each ask ourselves, to your point of not worrying about, did I do that last meeting perfect? But, you know, what, I don't know, it's like, can I drive more, or just something to, I don't know, if you have any mantras.
So this is a funny one. One of my mentors once said to me, Cory, perfection is the work of the devil. And his point was, in pursuing it, you by its very nature can never reach it. When in fact, purely the work of moving and getting started and pushing, that is what you should be worried about, doing what you think is right for you. And so I try hard. I have very high perfectionist tendencies. I try very hard to put those to the side and unleash the amazingness of the people around me, and allow for lots of messiness in the process, because I think greatness comes from unleashing the momentum of others, not the perfection of them.
I like that. You wonder, you know, how can we move forward together? I like that passion, and the messiness just comes with humans, so that makes sense.
It does, and I think, look, we all see it. You guys know when you're either working with someone or you have that employee, and you all of a sudden see their skills matched with like that perfect role, and you watch them bloom. And it doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes it's after a year of hard development conversations, and all of a sudden you just see like this magic happen. And it's not because everything's perfect. It's because the passion is matched really well with the work, and then they're put in an environment where they can allow those things to bloom. I think it's really, really powerful, but that means often you have to let go to a much greater extent than might be your tendency as, if you're like me, a little bit of a perfectionist.
I like that. How can we make the magic happen? That's enrolling.
I mean, look, someone asked me on one of our interviews, they said, what's the hardest decision that you've had to make since COVID hit? And I thought about it, and really the truth is, there isn't one decision that I've made by myself. I have an amazing team of people, an amazing board, amazing pool of resources and other CEOs. I think if we open our ears and eyes to the amazing resources around us, that's, I think, when real, like we were just talking about, real magic can happen. And so there's this like weird misnomer that somehow at CEO, you just like sit in your office and crank out decisions all day long. And really, it's much more about leveraging really smart people around you to accomplish amazing things.
It seems to connect back to where we started, of your journey and being vulnerable. I just feel like you're the articulation of the future CEO, obviously current CEO, but of that magic together, rather than just everything top down by one component. So that's an amazing story.
Wow.
The last question we have is around diversity support. Anything else to add around what Best Buy is doing to increase either diversity in the employee base or supporting local minority-owned businesses?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit this from a couple angles. So in terms of our own employee base, we have been on a long journey. And you can imagine we have, I'm going to overly simplify this into kind of two broad swaths of employee base. We have a large corporate presence here in the Twin Cities. And then we have 1,000 stores and a store network across the country. And in each of those spaces, we have slightly different opportunities to improve our diversity. But at the end of the day, most of those boil down to making sure we are working hard to ensure there are more women in positions of leadership and people of color in positions of leadership. And that is true across the board. And so we are working on not just who do you hire, because you can lose that in the law of averages sometimes, but how are people progressing their careers throughout Best Buy? How are they advancing? What do the leadership populations look like? And how are we providing unique opportunities for our teams here? And like I said at the beginning, I am not saying for a second that we are perfect at this. We have a long way to go. The good news is I have some really passionate and helpful employees that are going to help us on that journey. So that's kind of like this internal side of the question. On the external side of the question, in terms of supporting minority businesses, we've taken a little bit, well, there's two tacks here. We have a very defined process that we're going through on the procurement side of things to try to work with more minority-owned businesses, not just here in the Twin Cities, but more broadly. But one of the things, and I hit on it quickly, that Best Buy has been very passionate about is the achievement gap. And for those of you who've done work here in Minnesota, the achievement gap is one of the worst in the nation, even given all of the amazing educational opportunities there are. And so we had started a number of years ago what we call teen tech centers. And they are set up in more underprivileged areas. They are completely outfitted with technology equipment and then staffed in partnership with a local not-for-profit. So here in the Twin Cities, as an example, we have one that's partnered with Hope Community. And it's at their location. We help with all the staffing and all the requirements. And kids go there mainly as an after-school program, and it's teens. And they learn about careers in STEM. And it's everything from music mixing, video editing, to more coding, graphic design. I mean, it runs the gamut. And already we're seeing a much higher propensity to want to graduate and much higher propensity to want to go to college. So this for us has become a real staple of what we are in partnership with others pushing out across the country. And then in Minnesota specifically, we've also been driving a Connected Minnesota pledge where we are working to partner with the governor's office and other not-for-profits and large corporations to provide the hardware and the connections that kids need to learn from home. There are at least 25,000 kids in Minnesota alone that do not either have the hardware they need to learn from home or the connection that they need to learn from home, meaning just the bandwidth speed. And we are working hard to push out resources immediately to try to help those kids. So very long-winded. I am super passionate about the opportunities that exist here. And, you know, I would double back and say it's not like we're doing everything right, but I feel like every company here trying to make momentum, that means change will be continuous.
Just a huge thank you for that, of what you're doing at Best Buy across really the inclusion and diversity. And just want to acknowledge your time and your wisdom today. It's been very inspiring. I know that this is recorded, so we'll share the link out with all the attendees, and then we can all take notes separately.
Notes, I got to be honest, but it was a true pleasure, and I just appreciate, and I know in my career journey I have appreciated little snippets of advice from many others. So, you know, hopefully there was a little snippet that resonated with you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Cory, for joining us. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Jade Denson, leading the community outreach for Minnesota Tech Association. Jade, do you want to review what's next for WLiT and Minnesota Tech Association?
Absolutely. So I just confirmed I am unmuted and ready to go. So as Jean has already shared, my name is Jade Denson. I'm the Director of Community Engagement with the Minnesota Technology Association. I have to say, I feel like I drew the short straw to have to follow up after Corie Barry. So bear with me as I wrap up today's event and talk through a few updates. So WLiT is a community that's part of the Minnesota Technology Association, and we are super proud to support the efforts of the WLiT board as they curate awesome events like the one we just attended today to connect, educate, and reach back for women in tech. So we are experiencing a really challenging last 4 months as a community, and something that's coming up constantly in my professional network is, how can I help? What can I do? What can I be doing? And from our perspective, really investing in someone's ability to start their career in technology is such a tangible way for people to help. So I want to again just say thank you for your contributions to help jumpstart a woman's career in technology. And at the beginning of this call, Jean pushed us to really double down and donate more. And as you can see, you all responded. Since the call has started, we have now gone past that $2,000 mark, which is great, so that we can offset even more of the expenses for women starting a career in technology through the Software Guild. So I'm going to again nudge folks to keep donating, and you can keep donating by simply modifying your registration. If you are having any concerns doing that, definitely feel free to reach out to our team. So we all had the privilege of listening to Corie's insights today, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of just speak for the entire audience since I can't see you and say we really loved being able to hear from such a dynamic and inspiring woman like Corie. And today couldn't have happened without our awesome sponsors. So again, a huge thank you to our sponsors. Your investment really helps fuel the tech ecosystem here in Minnesota, and it truly helps us build an even stronger community for women leading in technology. So we are midway through the year, which is shocking to think about considering how long and honestly how heavy 2020 has already felt. But we still have 2 WLiT events remaining and 2 more opportunities for you to participate in WLiT programming. So I'm encouraging you to mark your calendars now and keep showing up. So for those of you that were with us in February in person, that event was great. And now we had Corie Barry at the one in June. So I'm encouraging you to mark your calendars for the last 2 events for WLiT. And with that, I kind of want to just say, have a good, safe, and enjoyable rest of your weeks. We really look forward to connecting with you all again in person. Until then, continue staying up to date regarding all things WLiT and all things Minnesota Technology Association. Have a good rest of your day.